thewellnesscouch.com, streaming wellness into your lives. This is Up for a Chat with Cindy O'Meara, Karen Smith, and Kim Morrison.
Here we are, up for a chat about the hottest topics that are important to you, inspiring you to awaken the change within. I'm Karen Smith.
And I'm Cindy O'Meara.
And our beautiful Kimmy is still away this week, so we have got an amazing guest for you guys who we're hoping is going to provide, some real thought-provoking information and really get us thinking about what it means to have mental health and mental fitness and wellness. Now, I know that you guys have heard us talking about Spirit Hive in the past, but, if you missed that episode, there's a very poignant statistic that we all need to be aware of, and that is that the World Health Organization is so far measuring that one person takes their life every 40 seconds. And by this time next year, they're expecting it to double, not get better, but double to one person every 20 seconds. And now here in Australia, we have 8.68 people take their life every day. 6 of those are men. And, I think that the more of us in this community that are focusing on what I call the psychosocial conversation, where we take out the sting of mental health and we make it a common conversation in and amongst our societies and in and amongst our communities, where people begin to see that, there's a distinction between melancholy and clinical depression, and there's a distinction between grief and post-traumatic stress. And I think that, we are such complicated and emotional beings that having these conversations, I'm so excited, I'm going to shut up in a second, but having these conversations on this podcast is really in an effort to support families and to support our communities to understand that there are people suffering and we can only make a difference together. So I'm so excited to welcome Kevin Humphreys to the show today, who was an amazing find again of our beautiful Cindy, who is got the most extraordinary story that will no doubt bring us all to our knees, but will build us right back up again as he shares what he's doing with his life these days. Kevin, welcome to the Up for a Chat show. What an honour to share this next hour with you.
Hi, Karen. Thank you. Wow, what an intro. It's I've got to say, it's really my honour, I think, to be asked to come along and share a little while with yourself and Cindy to talk about mental illness, suicide, and normalising the conversation. It is a conversation that has improved over recent years. There's no doubt about that, but we still have a long, long way to go. As you said, over 8 people a day in Australia die by suicide. Tragically, 6 of those 8 are men. And, there's got to be a reason for that. And I think I know part of the reason, although I'm no expert. And it's just something that we have to turn around. And as you said, the predictions are it's going to double in the near future.
I think, Kevin, the fact that you have experienced what we're talking about, which is mental illness, because I can't think of too many other things that would drive somebody to take their life unless they're not thinking right, or maybe it's grief. Even with grief, though, that's not necessarily the reason. But I think your story is something that I know I want to hear. Let me explain how Kevin and I met. So Kevin's wife, Megan, actually did our Nutrition Academy, and she is a fully qualified graduate and consults on health. And she learnt a lot, not only in her own journey with Kevin, but in the journeys of others. And we met recently at a conference, and Kevin spoke in the morning and I spoke in the afternoon. And all I heard was unbelievable praise for your story and your presentation, Kevin. And I'm so sorry I didn't get there in the morning to hear it. So I guess it's my chance now to have you all to myself, although there'll be thousands of other people listening. But to to explain what you explained at that conference about your journey, how you thought your life was to serve your country with arms and how it changed. And so if we could start how you would have started that story a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, okay. I start off by talking about some of the stats that Karen spoke about. And, that is that 45% of Australians will experience a mental disorder at some stage in their lifetime. And when I'm in front of the stage, I stand in the middle and I say, okay, let's divide the room left and right. Let's divide the room front and back. Who wants the mental illness, folks? As we know, mental illness is not something that discriminates. It doesn't care about race, religion, gender, age, sexual preference, education, profession, income level. It really doesn't care. And, 8 people suicide every day in Australia, 6 of them are men. Mental illness is all around us, but no one talks about it, or very, very few. And mental illness is this incredibly human thing. And I think until we humanise it and stop demonising it, we're going to continue to have the problems that we have. And so, as you said, I joined the army, and I thought my purpose in life was to serve the country through the profession of arms. And whilst I do believe that was true and appropriate for the better part of 20 years, I've now realised that my new purpose is to lift humanity by inspiring courageous and compassionate conversations. And that's why I'm now here, and here on the planet, and here talking to both of you. So, if you were with me 30-something years ago, you would have seen a little fella about as high as a table, watching the TV and seeing guys in green uniforms run through the bush, and thought, wow, that looks good, I want to do that. And then as a teenager, I found myself looking up in the sky at rescue helicopters that were flying past, and landing in an oval a few streets away, just near the house where I grew up. And I thought, wow, that was pretty cool, I want to do that. And then in year 11 at school, I found out that the Army had helicopters, and I was sold. So I went off to the Royal Military College, did my military training, somehow got selected for pilot's course. Part of the way through there, in the first 6 months of there, I almost got scrubbed off course twice because I wasn't a very good fixed-wing pilot. But then when I got onto helicopters, then everything started to click. And indeed, by the time I finished up my 18 months of pilot training, I actually ducked the course. So I was pretty happy with that. And indeed, I was just 21 years old when I got the keys to a Black Hawk helicopter. And so started what some might call the boy's own adventure of flying all around Australia and various parts of the world. I had the better part of 20 years, or 20 years it was in the Army. Better part of that was flying around Australia, then deployments to East Timor in 99, 2000, 2001. I'd done drought and famine relief in Papua New Guinea in 97 and 98. Deployed to Iraq in 2003, and then to Afghanistan in 2005, 2006, 2007 and 2008. And it was a very serious time in the Army, a very serious thing, being deployed to those various conflict zones around the world, and even the drought and famine relief. It was challenging in its own way. Now, what a lot of people don't realise, though, is that even though a lot of people talk about deployments, they talk about how stressful deployed life is, and most of that is true, if not all of that is true. What a lot of people don't realise is the challenge and sometimes the trauma that's encountered on a normal daily basis. And during my time in the Army, 34 Australian Defence Force personnel died in Australian military helicopter crashes that had nothing to do with the enemy, had nothing to do with being shot at. They were all preventable accidents. And I was almost added to that list a couple of times. One in particular was when I had a mid-air collision with a boat that I was doing external load trials on, and it swung up beside the aircraft, wrap itself around the side of the aircraft, and put a hole in the side of the aircraft as it hit. And thankfully, the nose of the boat stopped about 5 feet underneath the rotor tips.
Wow.
As we were flying along. And it was just a regular day at work in Townsville. That was just any other regular day at work, about 1 kilometre from the air traffic control tower in Townsville. Yeah, so that was just the normal everyday, you know. Not having a mid-air collision with a boat was normal every day, but we were, you know, playing high stakes pretty much every day. So life was deadly serious at home and abroad, and is for all of our military personnel just the same as it is for all of our emergency services personnel, day in and day out. But you know, if we have a quick chat about Afghanistan, which is probably the most, or not probably, it was the most challenging of my deployed operations. A couple of things over there stood out. You know, I led our 2 Chinook helicopters in a combination with Dutch Apaches and American aircraft over the top, and Canadian and Afghan special forces and Australian commandos, and we conducted an assault onto a Taliban compound, literally landing these 20-ton plus helicopters literally just metres away from the compound in the middle of the night on night vision goggles. Completely browned out in dust, can't see anything from before you put the helicopter on the ground. 40 seconds later, the troops are out the back and you're up out of the way as they're into the firefight. And we were meant to go back and pick them up about 40 minutes later, and unfortunately, things became quite frenetic on the ground, and it became a huge firefight, so that it was about 2.5 hours that we were waiting to go and pick them up. But in this time, the moon had gone down, and anyone who knows anything about night vision goggles understands that the night vision goggles require ambient light. They magnify ambient light. So if there's no ambient light, because there's no moon, because it's overcast, and on top of that, the moon has gone down, so it's below the horizon now. There's no starlight because it's overcast, and there's no ground lighting because you're in the middle of Afghanistan. Then it's black, it's dark, and the goggles really can't do anything. So, and the firefight was continuing and getting hotter. And indeed, you know, one of the pilots from the other aircraft came over and said, whilst we were waiting, I said, "Hey, boss, you know, really shouldn't go. It's pretty fierce up there. The moon's gone down." And he was right. He was absolutely right from a technical perspective. But the fact was that there were 70 men up there that needed our help, and if we didn't get them out, they were going to be in all sorts of problems. So we got the call. I told him to get back in the other aircraft and get on with it. And to his credit, he did. And this is courage. This is courage. He did. And we flew in there, and somehow we landed in the horseshoe that the commandos on the ground had created for us, and all hell erupted all the way around us with machine gun fire and rocket-propelled grenades and you name it, going all around the place. We managed to get our troops on board and get out of there, and not a scratch to anybody involved, and somehow get all those people out of harm's way. Now, that other aircraft, though, they almost flew into the ground because it was so dark. And that decision weighed on me for quite some time. There was another time we were trying to put, again, special forces onto a ridgeline, and hanging, 1,000 feet over this cliff edge there, whilst trying to back the helicopter onto a ridgeline that I couldn't see apart from looking over my left shoulder to get any form of a hover reference, and moving the helicopter just, again, 20-odd tons of helicopter in the middle of the night on night vision goggles, moving it just inches at a time, but only moving it based on what I could hear the crewman was saying, because he was the only guy who could see the rocks that we were trying to avoid hitting with our blades, and they were only about 5 feet away. And so just the slightest kiss of the blades on those rocks and it would have all been over. Another event was
Kevin, can
rocket
I just
attacks.
Ask you before you go on, how does it play on your mind? Like each time I'm listening to it and I can't even imagine this. I'm trying to stop round up in the council, and I feel like, this is like, how does it play on your mind, that you could, that's what I want to know. And then I want to hear about the rockets.
You normalise it, and it becomes a necessary evil that you need to do. And it's not about, when you're there as an individual, it's not about winning the war. It's about keeping your mates alive. And it's about doing whatever is required within the laws of armed conflict to ensure that you and your teammates go home again. And that's actually one of the things I'm going to talk about very, very shortly, is the impact that had on me, because I took that incredibly seriously, and that's part of what actually brought me undone.
How old were you at this point?
34.
So still young.
Yeah, okay. Absolutely. So the rocket, rocket attacks were a pretty common event at Kandahar where we were. And, one particular night, I'd just finished in my bedroom donga, was walking out the front gate across to the mess hall, and the familiar whistle went overhead, and boom, inside our compound, and went back, and my bedroom had been shredded, landed about 5 metres from my bedroom, the shrapnel went through mine and 3 other rooms. There was actually a woman in the 3rd room along, as the shrapnel went through her room, and somehow she was missed completely. Absolutely unbelievable that she was missed. But as I say, and you came to it spot on, Cindy, the rockets, the bullets, the cliff edges, all that stuff, though, they actually didn't bring me undone. I didn't don't get me wrong, I'm not sitting here being full of bravado and saying, check me out. I didn't like them very much, but they weren't the things that brought me undone. They were seriously just another day in the life of a deployed soldier, sailor or airman. What brought me undone was the worry that I put myself through, wondering if I was going to send one of my men or women home in a box. And we used to attend ramp ceremonies, which is where a fallen soldier's casket would be put on a waiting aircraft to be sent home. And we would go to every one of the ramp ceremonies that we could possibly get to pay our respects. It didn't matter what nation they were from. And I'm very, very fortunate during my time there, despite the worry I put myself through, that not a single Australian died whilst I was there. But the image of a flag-draped casket is etched into my mind from how many I saw. And the other part that absolutely tore me apart was the toxic command environment that I was caught up in, and that continued in various ways when I got home. And you don't need to be in a war zone to have bullying. You don't need to be in a war zone to have a toxic workplace. I'm sure every one of your listeners can think of an environment at some stage that they've been in where that kind of thing exists, and that is cancerous, and it is toxic. And like I say, that's really what brought me undone in the end.
So this was, sorry, Karen, you go.
No, I was just going to say it's interesting. I've got a couple of friends of mine who were in the army, and they say exactly the same thing, Kevin. They talk about how destructive, soul-destroying, toxic, cancerous, sick the leadership structure is, the bullying, and both of them landed up retiring early because of depression. And they hands down attribute their depression and suicidal tendencies to the whole structure there, which is very interesting.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, I suppose it's natural human behaviour to have power go to people's heads, or to have really core people who've no idea how to lead in leadership roles. I mean, we see that in business and, in education. We see it everywhere. But you'd kind of hope that there would be a bit better structure for the people that are keeping our country safe. That doesn't seem to be the case.
No, and, in many ways, defence is just another cross-section of society, and good, bad, and different. And we do like to think that there are higher standards, and we do like to think that there are ideals, and the ideals that are espoused in the training academies, the officer training institutions, and the non-commissioned officer and the soldier training institutions, that the ideals that they espouse are carried forth. And unfortunately, it's not always the case. Normally, because of individuals, not so much because of policy. Policies generally are pretty good, but again, I think every person listening here would understand the difference between an organisation that is well run because of the policies versus because of the individuals. It's always the individuals who end up dictating how an organisation is run, regardless whether the policies are good, bad, or indifferent. And so when people blame the system for things, well, it's individuals within the system. People make up the system, and people need to be held accountable when they behave poorly. Unfortunately, if there's a number of other individuals in higher places with a consistent view, then that doesn't bear well. And for me, when I had my breakdown in 2008, and I was often kind of jumping straight up here to talk about that, but I had a breakdown in 2008, and took me 9 months to get back to work. And when I got back to work, I had a very empathic boss, and he was incredible. He turned around and said, here I was, on a return to work policy, 2 days a week, reasonably senior officer, going back into work, no limp, no sling, no cast. And I wondered, and I still remember, what are they thinking about me? What are they saying about me? What's going on behind my back? And the fact is that there were two types of people. There was either people who cared or people who really didn't care. And so my paranoia was far worse than the reality. But my boss, a fellow by the name of Peter Clay, and I'll forever sing his praises, he called me in the office and he said, Kev, I know you're on a return to work policy program. I don't need to know why. I just need to know how many days a week I could expect to see you here. And you need to know that you're an officer of certain rank. And for those 2 days a week, I expect you to produce the goods commensurate of that rank. And he said, one more thing you need to know about me. Excuse me. He said, I will never give you sympathy, but I will always give you empathy. And that was just gold to me, absolutely gold. I didn't want to have a special project and put in the corner and, people don't go and talk to Kev, just let him do his thing. I wanted to get back on being me again. I wanted to be able to be Kevin Humphreys, not a special project in inverted commas. And that was just magic. But at the same time as he was incredible and empathic, another part of the army was quite literally labelling me as damaged goods, and that nobody buys damaged goods. So my future career in the army was toast at that point.
Isn't that's just, there's so many things to say about that, Kev, but, honestly, I look at, first thing I want to say is you must be a bloody good helicopter pilot is all I can say about that. You must be absolutely legendary. Absolutely legendary. I started getting my pilot's license flying a helicopter because my dad's a pilot. And, I had a really awesome instructor who used to make the skids on the helicopter dance around a huge big tyre.
Yep.
And that was my challenge. When I could get the machine to dance around the outside of a tyre and bounce off a tyre, then I'd kind of arrived.
Yep.
Honestly,
good stuff.
to me, to hear all the things that you did, you must be unbloody believable. Are you still flying?
Yeah, I am. I actually fly rescue helicopters for Queensland Government. So I'm a flight instructor and a flight examiner there, and I still fly operationally as well. So yeah, I still go and pluck people on the side, off the sides of cliffs or car accidents or out in the middle of the ocean or whatever's required. So yeah.
Well, you know what? I just want to say, lucky us for having you. You're amazing. You're absolutely amazing.
Thank you.
But I think what was the Army's loss is actually society's gain.
Well, and I do thank you for those comments. They're very humbling. I can honestly say, though, that there are countless others out there, day and night, ready, willing, capable, and delivering, both in the Army and in the emergency services in the search and rescue space, that are every bit as capable as me, and indeed more so. So I very much take your praise. Thank you. But it's absolutely a team effort, and the crewmen involved are no less spectacular in their roles as the pilots who hold onto the controls. But it's interesting. When I fell in a heap in 2008, part of what hit me so hard was the shame that I felt as a failure, that I, months earlier, had been in Afghanistan working with and leading incredible men and women doing amazing things on behalf of their country. And now I couldn't hold on to an ice cream without dropping it and becoming an absolute inconsolable mess in the corner, or trying to hammer a nail into a wall. And I'm pretty reasonable as a woodworker, as a hobby. And now I found myself unable to literally put a single nail into a wall to hang a picture without, again, finding myself sobbing incoherently on the floor. And so I really honestly felt I had failed my country, and I'm not exaggerating. Felt I'd failed the Army, my family, my unit, my colleagues, my children. And now, though, I look back, albeit 10 years later, and I look back and I think I had to go through all of that for me now to be able to have the conversations that I have with people to normalise this topic and to help bring people around, whether it's to do with addiction, whether it's to do with mental illness, or whatever the case may be. And I do believe that it is my new purpose in life, as I said. And so when you say that the Army's loss is society's gain, it took me a hell of a long time to see that, but I now see that very clearly, and I'm so happy and privileged to be able to contribute now in this way. It's incredible.
I have a question regarding this whole. I guess I'm thinking about what you've done, what you have achieved, the situations you've been put in, the gunfire, the near misses, the everything, the incredible pilot that you are. So I'm thinking about all of this, but I want to know, when was the point, and what does it look like when you could no longer continue doing what you were doing? So, what is a breakdown? What does it look like? And what happened? Was there a final straw that broke the camel's back, or could you feel it coming on for quite some time?
Yeah. How long have we got? The short answer to this is it's a roller coaster, a nightmare roller coaster. And looking back, first had my first panic attack was in 2000 after my first trip home from East Timor. Now, nothing happened of note in East Timor, and I still am completely, utterly baffled where this came from and why. But I've been in East Timor for a couple of months. I came home for 5 weeks, 5.5 weeks actually, to do a 5-week course at Oki and then go back to East Timor again. and I was actually in Brisbane walking into a shopping centre to get a loaf of bread, and what just seemed like a flood of people came towards me, and I just instinctively, completely involuntarily flattened myself against a shop window, a pane of glass. And you couldn't have made me any more thin than the sticker that was on the glass. And I remember almost having this out-of-body experience, thinking, what are you doing there? And these people walked past, and then some more people came past, and eventually I peeled myself off the window, managed to rush in, get the loaf of bread, and rush out of there. And I didn't tell a soul. I didn't tell Megan. I didn't tell anybody, because I didn't know what the hell had just gone on with me. And I was confused, embarrassed, everything. 2003, in Iraq, driving in the back streets of Baghdad, was an incident that ultimately led to nothing but scared the hell out of me at the time. And that was what contributed, or that was the event that led to my post-traumatic stress. At the time, I sort of put on the bravado and put it all behind me. But a few days later, and I know this by looking back at my journal that I kept, I noted in my journal that my hands were shaking, and I wasn't sure why or what that was related to. I was back in Australia about a month, give or take, a month after that, and very shortly thereafter was crying in the middle of the night, screaming, calling out, flinching. When I eventually woke up, asking Megan, am I normal? What the hell's going on with me? But forbidding her from talking to anybody, and I wasn't going to talk to anybody about it, because I really feared that if I put my hand up as needing some help or something not being right, that my career would have been terminated, my army career would have been finished. And so that continued on in 2003, 2004, and indeed wasn't actually diagnosed till after I had my breakdown in 2008. I'll come to that in a sec. 2006, so 2007, sorry, when I came out of Afghanistan in 2007, or just before I came out, I found myself in a counselling session with another officer, a young female officer, actually, I'm ashamed to say. And, well, actually, it doesn't matter if it's male or female. I'm ashamed of how this happened. But I found myself at the point of realising that she wasn't looking at my face anymore, and she was looking at my hands, and she couldn't take her eyes off my hands. My hands were shaking absolutely uncontrollably as I was talking to her. And I looked down, and that's when I realised that the game was up, so to speak. And there'd been, other indicators for me leading up to here, but none as evident as that. And so in 2007, when I came out of Afghanistan, they have a thing called a POPS, post-operational psychological support screening or something. And I actually said at that time, I need to see somebody. I need to see a psychologist because something's not right. And it took me about 3 months to see somebody, which I found unbelievable. Both that it could take 3 months after I voluntarily said I need to see someone, and also that the Army couldn't supply one any sooner. And when I did, unfortunately, the psychologist that I saw, if anything, only made matters worse from their own lack of experience and lack of worldly exposure. And so I started to take things into my own hands and self-medicate with alcohol, and drank a lot of alcohol. And it didn't matter what time of the day or night or day of the week or whatever else was involved. And thankfully I wasn't in a flying job. Now, when I came out of Afghanistan in 2007, I went into a ground job, a desk job. But and so the nightmares were continuing, the alcohol was continuing, I had little kids at home, had a fuse a nanosecond long, and the combination of all that, and the bullying at work was continuing. So the combination of all those things was just feeling untenable, and so got to the point where I thought, you know what, things would be a lot better if I just wasn't here, and so I started thinking about ways to die, to finish my life, and one of the final straws was a bullying event at work. Well, actually, I confronted my supervisor, who I perceived was bullying me, and he basically just laughed in my face and said, I am what I am. It is what it is. His exact words, they're still etched into my mind. But anyway, I won't repeat all of them.
I like how you don't say his name, but you say the nice man's name.
Yeah.
Yeah. Isn't it funny how we love to lift up the people that have helped us and not name the people that have condemned us?
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? The people who need to know who he is. So that's, and I know who he is and he knows who he is. But yeah, so then that weekend I was doing some paving around the pool, and anyway, things just weren't going right. I couldn't get anything to go right, and didn't get all the paving finished. It was now Monday morning, and I just thought it would just be easier if I wasn't here. But when I went to the point of doing something about it, I collapsed. And thankfully, Megan was home that day. And, even though I had the phone number for the unit psychologist and the doctor in my phone, and I was work colleagues with them, A, I was masking it well enough that they didn't know the full extent, and B, I was too ashamed to actually call them myself up to this point and ask them for help. I would just rather die. And after I collapsed, Megan took my phone and asked me if she wanted me, if I wanted her to ring them. And I was a sobbing, incoherent mess. I couldn't speak, or I was just shaking. Convulsing, actually, is the better word for it. I was convulsing and just could not do anything apart from just shake a little bit more to indicate, yes, call them. And so they came around and we spoke for a couple of hours, and we spoke about a lot of things. One thing in particular, it was a question that they asked very directly, and it was if I had a plan to kill myself. And I answered quite honestly, no, despite all the things that had been going on in my mind. And the reason that I answered no was because in my such rigid way of thinking, impacted by the depression and the anxiety and the post-traumatic stress and all the rest of it, whilst I had a way and a place with a couple of options well and truly mapped out for how to do it, because I didn't have a date and time scheduled in my calendar to do it, then in my very military, rigid thinking, ill mind, I didn't have a plan. I was still only thinking about it. And so based on that, I said, no, don't have a plan to kill myself. But I'm sure Karen can attest to what I now know from a reasonable point of view, and what I now know about suicide. I absolutely had a plan, and I was contemplating doing something about it that morning, but managed to collapse instead. And so that's what I call my breakdown. And so then from there started 9 months of recovery, and psychologists, psychiatrists, counsellors, and all the rest of it to start to get myself back on track.
And did you find that the psychologists and the counsellors that you saw at the time, they were able to help in that recovery period?
Yes, they did. The psychiatrist, I've got to say, another name I won't mention. Initial diagnosis was based on I can't remember how long, a very short interview where he didn't even look at me apart from the 2 seconds where I walked in the door, and apart from that, he read his emails for most of the rest of the time that I was in there with him, which was incredibly disappointing, and ended up with a diagnosis which was not correct and not accurate. The psychologist I found was very helpful, very effective, going through, because at that stage, whilst the post-traumatic stress was there, it had subsided in many ways, or at least taken a back seat to the depression and the anxiety had really, really taken hold. And so, going through CBT, cognitive behavioural therapy, and starting to look at exercise to get the great chemicals running through the brain again, starting to eat better, which I'm sure we'll talk about at some stage, Cindy. But yeah, so starting to work piece by piece on getting me back together, and indeed one of the big things that I found for myself during that time was actually visualization. I'm a fairly visual kind of guy, and at some stage during that 9-month period, I somehow got the phrase, "My mind got me into this, my mind will get me out of it." But I needed something more than that, and something I could actually visually see in my mind. And so I actually thought back to the $6 Million Man, which both of you probably remember from a TV show only a few years ago.
Yes.
Yes, only a couple ladies. But yeah, so I loved that show when I was a teenager. And for those who don't know, just in case there are any people under the age of 20-something, maybe a bit older, who don't know who the $6 Million Man is, it was a TV show in the 80s about an astronaut that was in an accident, should have died, and they rebuilt him with robotic technology or bionic technology. And the catch cry was that we have the technology to rebuild him, make him better, faster, stronger than he was before. And so I would put my head on his body, and I would see me as him in my mind, running or doing this or doing that. And so whether I was out for a run, sitting in the psychiatrist's office, going for an ice cream with the kids, whatever it was, going for a loaf of bread, I would see my head on his body, and I would say to myself again and again and again, we have the technology, it can rebuild him, going to make him better, faster, stronger than before. I'm going to rebuild my brain. And that became my mantra, and that helped get me back to work.
That's brilliant. That is absolutely brilliant. Can we now talk about what Megan learnt and how she helped with your recovery as well?
As I mentioned, about exercise and cognitive behavioural therapy and thinking, but now this is going back 10 years ago, and Megan only found you, Cindy, 3 years ago, I think 3, maybe 4 years ago. And so Megan's always had an interest in nutrition and eating well. She was a surf lifesaving captain. She's a swimmer and whatnot. And she's always had an interest in nutrition. And thankfully for me, she is an outstanding cook. She is a brilliant cook, and she will give anything a go. And I think in almost 25 years of marriage, there's only been 2 occasions where I've said, you know what, honey, you don't have to cook that one again. And so she will give anything a go. She loves fresh food. And so where we were living when I had my breakdown, was actually we're on a couple of acres, and we had our own veggie patch, and totally organic, although we didn't use that phrase at the time. But no herbicides, no this, no that, nothing going into the soil unless it's natural from the soil, effectively, in some way, shape, or form. And so we had a pretty reasonable crop of food. We also used to get meat from a butcher where we knew where and how where the meat came from, and so we then we started, particularly after I had my breakdown. So let me see, because we moved into that house only a couple of months prior to my breakdown, and so as I said, this had been leading up for years and years prior to that. And so we were now in this house with the veggie patch, good veggie patch and all the rest of it, for the period of my recovery, and then subsequent years after that, for a few years before we then moved again. But so Megan was emphatic that we had good quality food, locally sourced wherever it could be, and that processed foods and all the rest of it. She's never been a fan of them anyway, but where possible, she would just eliminate them, and not just for her, but for us as well, much to the chagrin of the kids and myself at times, I've got to say. We got to the point of being, I got to the point of being functional again. And this is another one of the things that I talk about, is that, yes, I got myself back to work after 9 months or so, but, I actually kept that a secret for 7 years, and I got Megan to keep it a secret for 7 years as well, because I was so ashamed of what had happened. And so it was only in 2015 that I actually started talking about it publicly for various reasons. Haven't got time to go into them all now. But I think it was 2014, 2015, about the same time that Megan and I both saw you, I think, Cindy, for the first time, talking about everything that it is that you talk about so incredibly well. And Megan really started to change up our diet and improve our diet, and indeed over the last 12 months has gone to incredible levels with it. But what we found was absolutely incredible, the difference that what I call quality, clean food makes to your mental health. So getting rid of the preservatives, getting rid of the processing, and just getting to good old-fashioned food that you know what it is and where it came from, because and you two ladies know this far better than I do, and can say it far more eloquently than I can. But the gut is the first filter for the brain. And if we want to have a brain that's clear of fog, and if we want to have a brain that is able to think straight, and we want to have the ability to get in front of ourselves when it comes to mental illness, and not let our unconscious, our reptile brain hijack our conscious brain, then we need to eat decent quality, clean food in order to give the brain the best possible chance at doing that. And indeed, I've now been to a couple of seminars or symposiums with Dr. Norman Doidge, a psychiatrist out of the States, as well as...
He's amazing.
Absolutely. Bessel van der Kolk as well, and talking about traumatic brain injuries and various other things. And they're both huge advocates of the need for cell chemistry to be through diet and through what you put in your mouth to be the first step of neuroplasticity and good mental health.
It's interesting. I have in front of me right now an army ration pack that was given. Yeah, exactly. This is what you guys are eating when you're out there on manoeuvres, and it's disgusting. I'm sorry, but the Australian government need to pick their act up but it's got flavour enhancers. I'm reading it. This is the chunky chicken and vegetables. So this is from a 2011 pack that still sits on my office desk or just to the side of it. And the ingredients are, so this is the chicken and vegetables. It's got water, chicken, stock, water, marine salt, rice flour, sugar, natural flavours, yeast extract, vegetable protein extract, dehydrated vegetables, flavour enhancers, 67631, canola oil. Then it's got a couple of vegetables, and then it's a modified maize, a starch, a sugar, salt, and then fake vitamins and minerals. And, I wonder about you guys and the girls, that if you're going on manoeuvres and you have to think straight and you have to think smart and you're being fed this, I've also got musks and spearmint, juicy fruits. I've got a Scotch finger. I think this was 3 days, he said. So I've got Scotch fingers, and then I've got a chocolate drink. And then this one, what's this one? This is a barbecue beef that starts with wheat. So I just find if we have so many people in the army with this issue that we're now seeing, why are we not changing this? Why is there... Because surely if we kept our brains moving well and you had that cognitive behaviour, and no doubt Megan would have talked to you about the summit and all the emotional freedom technique that she would have learnt about. I just think it's, and I do believe there's some research on EFT and post-traumatic stress disorder. So I see you and Megan as, fighting this fight or winning this, whatever it is that we have to win, in order to make sure our soldiers come back okay.
Yeah, and it's it's a huge, to say it's a huge issue is a huge understatement. The ration packs, and I'm not defending them in any way. Indeed, when I first joined the army in '91, I was eating ration packs that were coming out of Vietnam. So things have improved a little bit since then. But yeah, and the ration packs, it's again the trade-off, and I'm not defending them in any way. And I'm absolutely sure they can do a hell of a lot better than what they're currently doing. It needs to be in a way that is portable and useful for what the soldiers need. As well, and they do attempt to have fresh rations wherever they can, but for a lot of the troops, when they're out there in the field themselves, then that just simply isn't possible. And so, I'd love to be able to work out how do we get them appropriate, clean food, in my words, that will sustain them for the days and weeks at a time that they're away.
Well, I've been thinking about it, Kevin. So we need to get together and really thinking about it, because I just feel that if we had the right food for them, then, it would be at least a start. I know there's a lot more involved, and I understand that, but I think everybody works in their own area of expertise, and then we bring it all together. Maybe we can help just a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely.
So going away from food, because it always comes back to food with me, but let's move away from food as we finish up this podcast. Is there anything that we haven't spoken about that you want to talk about your speaking, about what you're doing? I'll put in the show notes how people can contact you for speaking engagements. Because is there anything that you want our audience to know that we haven't spoken about yet?
I guess the one thing I'd say is that and this is said a number of times, but you never know. You just never, ever, ever know two things. One is what someone else is going through or has been through, or what's going through their mind at a given point in time. And unless you ask the question and the other person is willing and prepared to tell you or let them in under the mask, then you'll never, ever know, because none of us are mind readers. So that's number one. And the second one is you never ever know when something you say, something you do will be life-changing for somebody else. And that became really clear to me last year, and I'll make this really quick so I know we need to wrap up, but last year I got invited to The Hague and in the Netherlands. One of the Dutch Apache pilots that I flew with in 2006 on that mission that I spoke about where we picked up those 70 guys. He went back again in 2007, 2008, 2009, and he contacted me last year. We'd been in loose contact, and he contacted me last year and said, Kevin, hope you're well, and I was wondering if you could come to The Hague in August to see me get presented the Military Order of William. And I went, wow, yeah, sure. And I looked it up, and it's basically their equivalent of a Victoria Cross, but it comes with a knighthood. And it's only the third one to be presented or awarded since World War II. And he said, and by the way, we'll pay. Happy with that.
Wow.
And so I trotted off to The Hague on the 31st of August last year, watched the parade, 600 people on parade, sultans, royalty, whoever else in the crowd, Kev Humphreys. After the parade, ushered into this little stone building. It was only about 800 years old, called the Grand Hall of Knights. And then was ushered over this little red roped off area, and I was told this is the regal reception area and the King and Queen will be here to meet you shortly. And so I wandered over there, and there were 3 Americans standing there as well, and each of those had been there one each year in 2007, 8 and 9 and worked with Roy, the fellow who got the award. And we were the only 3 people, foreigners, invited by Roy personally. All the rest were official guests and all the rest. And Roy came over with the King and the Queen and introduced me or did the introductions with the Americans and then with me. And then I was standing there literally shoulder to shoulder with the King of the Netherlands and the Queen beside him and then Roy. And Roy said, Your Majesty, this is Kevin Humphreys. He was the Chinook commander in Afghanistan in 2006 when I was there as a junior captain. And I got immense inspiration for his loyalty, his devotion to the ground troops, and his innovative approach to come up with missions to keep them safe. And he became my role model for the last 3 years, or for the next 3 years. That just floored me. Now, I'd had maybe 3 missions that I flew with Roy. I think I had about 10 conversations with him over the period of a few weeks. But I had no idea of the impact I had on that young man. And the reason I add this at the end is because if I had killed myself 10 years earlier, I never would have known the impact I had on this guy. And I never would have known that just by doing what I do every day at that time inspired him to go on and do something incredible. And so I talk about this at the end of my presentation to ask the audience, and indeed for everybody listening to this podcast, my challenge to you is, who are you going to inspire to do something incredible without even realising it? Not by trying, just by doing what you do every day. And whether that's changing perceptions around Roundup, whether that's changing perceptions for your family around what it is that they eat, whether that's looking out for a loved one for their mental health. We can act in very simple ways and yet have hugely profound impacts on other people and change the planet. So hopefully that inspires some people to do just that.
Well, I've got goosebumps, so all my goosebumps are very inspired at the moment. That was just incredible. Like, I got very teary and I went, you're right. You are so right. And I think everybody affects people in every way. We just don't know which ways it is, and let's make it positive and inspiring. So, Kevin, thank you so much. This has been an incredible hour for me and Karen, I know.
Definitely. It's been an amazing time, and thank you so much for sharing yourself with obviously all of our listeners, but of course everything that you do on a day-to-day basis. And I just love how you've just added that little extra bit of information in there for everybody, because I'm so with you 100% that if we are going to make change on this planet, it's not going to come from, an island in the stream. It's going to come from us doing things together and collectively. But it's, how much and what are we willing to contribute to the lives of others, whether knowingly or unknowingly? I think if we wake up each morning and we wake up inspired ourselves, then that can only breed more inspiration. So I think it's a beautiful, beautiful way to finish the show. So thank you so much for everything that you've shared with us today, Kevin. It's been amazing.
Thank you, ladies. Thank you, Cindy and Karen. It's as I said, my honour to be here. Thank you for the invitation to come on and spend the last hour with you.
Where can our listeners find out more about you?
So I have a website. It's my name, so kevinhumphreys.com.au. That's Humphreys spelled Humphrys, and I'm on Facebook and LinkedIn just under my name as well. So you can find me on any of those.
All right, we'll make sure that we put those details in the show notes. Kevin, this has been an amazing show. Thank you so much once again. It's been incredible. Cindy, you're an absolute legend as always. Thinking you're fabulous for finding these incredible peeps. Look at you go.
I love it.
Champion. Yes, you do. And yes, you do. So for all of our listeners, hopefully you guys have loved today's show and it's been thought-provoking for you. Head on over to our Facebook page at allthews.facebook.com/up for a chat. And you can post any comments or questions there. And if you want to chat with Kevin directly, you'll find all of his contact details in our show notes. You can also head on over to allthews.thewellnesscouch.com/up for a chat. Most importantly, though, make sure that you tune in next week right here on Up for a Chat and you get to become part of the ripple effect. It's an actual point of fact, changing the world together. We're going to see you on the ride. Bye for now, everyone.
This has been a production of TheWellnessCouch.com. Check us out on Facebook and join in the conversation on Facebook.com/TheWellnessCouch. Subscribe to each show on iTunes and check us out on Twitter. The Wellness Couch, streaming wellness into your lives. Whilst the Wellness Couch presenter endeavour to provide accurate and helpful information to their listeners, these podcasts cannot take into account individual circumstances and are not intended to be a substitute for health and medical advice from a qualified health professional. You should always seek the advice of a qualified health professional before acting on any of the information provided by any of the Wellness Couch podcasts.